Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, if you guys can hear me, just comment or chat so at least I know that I'm clear and loud. Oh, perfect. We'll take about 5 minutes to start because I see people coming in. I hope that's okay for you guys. Great. Thank you for waiting. Welcome, everybody. I see a lot of people joining. We have about 38 people. We will start about in 3 minutes from now. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. All right, I think we can start. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for making time today and starting. We will today talk about pro audio, and this session is more related to a career talk. Audio through Viscom. I can see still a few more people joining. Great. We shall start now. Thank you for again joining today. It's I'm coming live from Hamburg today. It's about 18 degrees, nice, warm, and sunny. I hope all of you are safe and sound, and I see so many people joining from not just in Coimbatore but quite a few places outside of Coimbatore and Tamil Nadu, which is nice. I am Kevin, and hi everybody. If you guys can see me, just say heads up on chat. I had a little glitch there. Can you guys see me clearly? Okay, great, thanks. So just to introduce myself a bit, my name is Kevin, and I'd like to thank you all again for making time and joining YouTube live session today. You will have to excuse me because this is my first time live, so it's kind of strange for me to not looking at anybody and then doing this session. So I will try to do my best, and I'm also at the same time doing the session and reading the chat. And we will try to be very dynamic in this session. Today's session is going to be divided into two segments. The first segment would be more of introduction about the career of audio. This could be applicable to students who are just in college and will about to be venturing out into different areas and will want to think on what to do and if audio can be career as an option. And within audio segments we will also look at different fields, and we will talk more in details on the roles for these details and how these can be applicable, and maybe it would give you a more good insight on how this creative fields looks like in terms of profession and career. And this is also applicable for parents who are also looking to see as an option for their students. So as you can see, my name is Kevin. Idly, if people do not see my name, they mistake me as it is a very British name, but I am not British, I'm India, as you can see by my face. I come from a beautiful city called Bangalore, and as most of you would know, it's in Karnataka. Originally from there, I grew up mostly there. My dad was in army, so we had to move around a lot, and we, in fact, after my dad retired, we settled there in Bangalore. And Yeah, so and then I got into college in Karunya. That's where I met Leo sir as one of our faculty members. So as part of today's session, I would like to thank Mr. Leo Gertrude from KLCLAS, and thank you for making this available for all of us, and an opportunity for me to join this session. It was very interesting for me to do this as a YouTube live session. I've done presentations before, but this is new. So thank you again for making this resourceful for everybody. I hope that this session is going to be helpful for all of you guys. And just as I said, that this session, the first half of the session, I would like to cover a few things about the career options and where you could actually apply these situations as in different areas within audio segments. As it is, audio engineering is very vast in itself. So we will explore that, and at the same time, we would the other half of the session would be Q&A, because I feel that would be more beneficial to respond to questions and seek out what you really need based on the impression that you have from the first half session. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. So right after my college, I started, well, within the college is where we started out. It was very interesting how we started out in professional audio as my interest. We were the first batch of the Viscom students, and this was at the same time when Leo sir was teaching at Karunya University, and we didn't really have any resource in terms of studios. At least for we did have the space, but we didn't really have, at least when we joined, the first half of the studios were in places. They had purchased the equipments but didn't really install, but they were in the process. So and also it was more of an experimental batch in terms of how they would want to run this course. So thankfully we had great lecturers and faculties like Leo sir and Mr. Jerry who were there to help us out, and it was interesting because we were at the same time starting, but during the evenings we're building studios. So we started out by soldering and helping, just doing the basic things to help with the studio design itself. And I think that's one of the very important aspect when it comes to audio itself, because it's known as technical creative arts, and you definitely need more practical experience to support your theory, and as opposed to any other industry for that matter. And we had a good rapport, at least in the next 3 years of our college was amazing. We learned a lot, and at the final year I did a small short album for my thesis, and at the same time I was trying to figure out which area of audio is I would be interested. And because there were too many options to figure out, and at the same time we were in still a phase where audio was mostly analog, although it was fairly to a lot of extent still digital, but we were still figuring out on how to, or I was still figuring out on which area to focus, whether should I go into studio or should I go to film sound and or audio engineering. And to my knowledge, I think we had a great teacher, Mr. Jerry sir, who inspired us into exploring various things. We did different sessions, but my personal interest leaned more towards live sound. And so the final year, apart from doing my day college, I would also take time to doing some freelance events, short events around Coimbatore, and beautiful city. And so we would do some house of worship events and shows, which were definitely a good benefit for me when I had to apply for a job. Although I had a placement from college, but I chose that it would be easier for me to stick to the work that I really like, and I think that's is very important when it comes to technical creative arts, or any creative arts for that, and that you need to have passion in order to be able to do what you like. So it was quite interesting for me to figure out that, and of course I was new and didn't really know where to start, what to start, but I knew that I had to do something in audio, and the path wasn't really clear. Then moving on, fast forwarding that ahead, I joined a Thompson Music House, which is a Yamaha distribution unit, as a project engineer, which was a great benefit for me, because here I was exposed to mixing consoles, and so basically this is a company that takes the Yamaha products and distributes them locally. So they were one of the regional distributors. A part of my job was to do trainings and product trainings and support locally and regionally, which was very essential in terms of my growth, at least for the few years. And quickly after that, I moved on to working for another company called Waves Audio, which was a very good role for me, and I think that really pushed, and of course I will also cover a few things on how that was very essential for me, because I think networking is one of the major important role when it comes to our industry, and no matter how good you are, you still need to have a good rhythm in terms of understanding where you need to be at the right time, and that really helps you a long way, and getting to know people, being more social within the industry, knowing who does what really helps you. So after Waves Audio, it was very interesting. Waves Audio is actually, if some of you have already been in a studio setup, I'm pretty much sure you would have already heard Waves Audio company. They produce studio software plugins, both for live sound and software. And after that, moved on to working for another company called Harman International. Harman International, if you guys know, is currently is owned by Samsung at this time, and they own brands like JBL, AKG microphones, and headphones. And so a part of my work there was as senior application engineer, and what I did over there was mostly same product trainings and support, and it was quite essential in terms of my growth there. I had a lot of expanse of majority in terms of what I need to grasp and learn. It was more than what I could think of, because we had different brands like AKG microphones. So I previously worked in a company that was very product specific. So Waves Audio, for instance, was more related towards software, and Thompson Music House, the Yamaha distribution unit, was more towards only Yamaha products. But when I came to Harman, it was a full product portfolio. So it was I was put in a situation where I had to already have really good knowledge in terms of knowing all the products, and there I moved on in terms of learning every day. This is a self-learning that you do on the job, making mistakes and making sure that you try not to do that and minimize the errors as much as you can, because audio industry again is one of the fields that can be unforgiving. So you have to be really be on your toes in terms of making sure that you minimize the errors. It's good to make mistakes. It's a better way for you to learn through them. And after that, at Harman, it was I worked there, and then I moved to Norway to do my course, because I was already working for these companies like Harman and Waves Audio for a few years, and I decided that I needed to take a break and learn more, get back into recording, because I think it was a good balance for me. After working for corporate, I would assign them as mostly audio corporate companies. So I had to take a break to get back to creative arts in terms of understanding how to really record well. When I say record well, we come in India. Ideally, we have studios which are, of course, amazingly equipped, but you don't really have much experience or chance in terms of exploring many options. So a part of my interest was that I gain more knowledge and be among people, be among peers who I could learn from. So there in Norway, I did a bit of consulting and at the same time study. So I studied on recording symphony orchestra, which is I worked mainly with an orchestra called Stavanger Symphony Orchestra. So a part of my job was actually recording them live. I think in a year I did about 50 odd recordings for them. It was a beautiful facility, and also it's one of those facilities where it is acoustically designed well. So it's more like an opera house, but much cleaner and nicer. So a space that you don't really need sound speakers, and I guess that's one of the beautiful things of orchestra, is that you do sound in a place where you don't really need speakers to amplify, which is probably the best part. So I had a good experience recording them, and it was a whole new dimensions in recordings, to really know get to know class musicians and understanding their playing techniques and learning different ways and applying. So it was more of I would call it 1 year of rehab, some sort, to get back to basics. And after that, I moved on and currently to Germany. I'm currently based out of Hamburg, and here at Steinberg, my main job here, as I work as a pro audio manager, what I do here is I take care of product launches, mainly for 3 products, which is Spectral Layers, Nuendo, and WaveLab. I work with the marketing teams and sales teams, and we come up with product launches and trainings and effective methods on what customer needs. And we work together with the developers on the newer features that is needed, whether it's broadcast, post-productions, and different areas. So that has been quite a long session of just about me. So I hope that gives you a good insight of how my career has spanned. I'd like to take this time to switch to a video role, which will give you a good insight of what Steinberg does and also how an audio company looks like. So I hope you guys enjoy this.
This is Hamburg, an independent historic harbour city. Hamburg prides itself on its cosmopolitan society and a thriving young adult community with many beautiful spots to enjoy urban life. Having a long and exciting musical history, Hamburg has always been home to an amazing diversity of music. And when the sun goes down, the spotlight shines brightest on the many cultural attractions and activities that this stimulating metropolis has to offer by night. First founded in the early 1980s and located today in the centre of town in one of Hamburg's monumental buildings is Steinberg, makers of Cubase, VST, ACO, WaveLab and Nuendo. At Steinberg, we are a large family of developers and marketers, musicians and engineers from all corners of the world, linked by the passion for music and audio technology. and all working together to develop the best and most creative tools for musicians, composers, and producers. For all of us, working at Steinberg is not simply a day job. This is what we all love to do. It's our vocation, and as a team, we can turn any idea, any concept into reality. Of course, everybody needs a work-life balance. But when music is your passion, then you want to make music whenever and wherever you can. Our passion also happens to be our industry. With all of these factors, it's easy to see why Steinberg is so much more than a business, more than a workplace, more than just another day at the office. It's a global family working together to create great products and content for the music and audio community in one of Europe's most progressive and culturally exciting cities. This is us. Together, we are Steinberg.
Hi again. So I hope you enjoyed that session. I hope that gives you a good insight on what Steinberg is. Good music. I think that's the base of our industry itself. Audio in itself is only possible if we have music, and of course, music. Regardless of however it is represented in different ways and forms. And if you then further now with the section ahead, what we are going to talk about is our different segments in pro audio within the same channel, as you would assume that it's the evident application for music is what you need within our industry, and that's like the base. To go ahead.
This is.
Sorry about that. I had a little glitch. Yeah. So pro audio, as you can see, is have these many segments, which is film, broadcast, live sound, and audiovisual, and game audio. This is how I would like to segment this, and we can talk about different segments. Now, let's talk about pro audio a bit. How is pro audio different than any other audio segments that you see? I would like to differentiate between two different terms. One is the consumer audio, and the other one is pro audio. Pro audio is basically wherever you would use film audio to amplify, over film broadcast to live sound to audiovisual areas or gaming audio. If you want to record stuff, so anything that involves professional gear to create more content related to broadcast materials or film musics or cinema sounds. So the equipment related to it is more pro audio. Consumer is mostly the materials that you would have, like your earphones or even your Bluetooth speakers. So we don't really consider that as pro audio items. Pro audio is a whole different league. Even the way they are manufactured, the kind of material that is being used, and for the purpose that is being built is very specific. And ideally, they are in terms of price ranges definitely more higher and efficient. So they do a very specific purpose for a specific segment. So pro audio, we can talk a bit more about on how pro audio in different segments is. Pro audio in recording. So in film sound itself, you have recording, dubbing, post-production, Foley, sound design, and mixing. Recording, of course, is an act where you record sound to mediums, whether in an isolation booth or different areas. Dubbing is, of course, when you would have mostly the sound that is related to dialogues for some film sound, and post production is also another field where you would do processing for audio that you have already recorded. So as you can see, this is in a process from first to start. So you record, you dub, post production, and at the same time you have Foley and sound design, which is also during the pre-production stages, where Foley is basically creating libraries with sounds that you hear around. So imagine if you have to do sound for horror movies, or for any kinds of if you want to bring out more naturalistic behavior in a cinema or movies, so you use Foley or sound design to make it more realistic. Imagine using sound to actually process it, to say if you're walking and you want to hear how that feels like, so you basically capture that before, and you add that at the post-production stage. Some of the items that you will see in the next few slides is more or less quite similar. Music production deals with more studio production, which is producing music. So that could be classical music to classic rock, to different ways like studio sessions, mostly the bands that you hear, even for film sound itself. So this is an art field and form where you would record sound, mostly to compose and to record for a very specific segment of industry, which is musical industry, which I think everybody knows. Now the roles that are involved are, music recording engineer, you have the dubbing engineer, you have the producer who's basically in charge of everything. Then you have mixing and mastering engineer. Mixing and mastering engineer is one of the very crucial roles within music production and film sound as well. You would notice that these are actually more important in terms of getting the output to how to how a music producer would like, or the composer would like to hear it and want to convey it to the consumer, or it could be any of us basically. Then you have the broadcast medium, which is of course your live radio mixing and broadcasting, archive engineering and mixing, which is mostly related to all the stuff that is more inclined towards live streaming platforms like news channels and radio jingles, and you can see some similarities in both of these things together. Live sound is quite interesting because this is very close to what I started out with, and is still very close to my heart. This industry is very unique. It's, if I may say, also kind of a little toughest than all the other industries, because live sound it keeps you on your toes, and it makes sure that you don't really have errors, because redundancy, which means that creating a concert or show without having errors, or foolproof or failure proof, as some would call it, is very essential. And all of these roles that you see, front of house engineer to monitor engineer, system engineer, stage manager, RF engineer. So just to give you a brief, a front of house engineer is basically the guy who is in the audience and mixing for the audience, and monitor engineer is another role, is a mixing engineer who's on the stage and mixing for the artist. And system engineer is the guy who actually, if you can look at these speakers where my mouse is pointing, so he designs these speaker systems. Basically there are various factors that he considers, the acoustical properties, so it goes to So designing a system like that is of course very prolonging, because imagine you have to get all the gear. So this happens depending on how big the show is, whether it's small format to big format. It can happen within a day setup or a 5-day setup. So within a 5-day setup, you can actually do it, for say about as small as 10 people to 100,000 people. So when it comes to the larger number, this setup of course becomes more complex, and designing sound of course becomes more complex. So systems engineer job is also to define sound, and it goes to as details as considering the humidity or weather in a similar place. And it's very interesting field, very closely related to a little more technical. And so a lot of physics is involved in terms of understanding how you need to do it. So a good knowledge of music, variety of music, because sometimes you're not really doing shows for just one type of music, but you're also doing shows for a lot of other people. And yeah, so I just saw a question that from behind somebody asked, what is the difference between Foley and live sound? Okay. So Foley is basically, imagine you have a portable recorder, and you just go out in the jungle to record the natural sounds of birds, or how the waters or streams sound like, and then you bring them back as libraries and basically use them wherever applicable. So you can actually put them as a background music to your YouTube channel content that you're creating, or a movie that you're making, or anything basically. So Foley is mostly related to an art where you capture natural sounds. Live sound is more of reinforcing or amplifying sound. So anything, it can be indoor or outdoor. So anything that you have to do to amplify sound is related to live sound, and how you do it is segmented into different areas, which is front of house, monitor engineer, and system engineer, and stage manager. Stage manager, quickly to sum up, is basically the guy who's managing the stage and also all the backline, and RF engineer is basically an engineer who's doing more on making sure that there are no interferences, as sometimes when you have big shows, you can have as many as 10-15 radio microphones. So the RF engineer's job is to make sure that he does a frequency span across the area, and make sure that what kind of wireless bands are available, and he uses those radio mics accordingly. Yes, so the last but not the least is also one of the most interesting audiovisual integration. This is, as you can imagine, is if you see sound in an installed setup, you would term that as audiovisual integration. Now you have different roles. Ideally, a company like sound system integration company, or audiovisual system integration company takes care of this job. And you have different roles over here, as you can see: pre-sales engineer, or design engineer, or AV engineer. This is also very interesting because this is basically at the initial phase of designing, say, a sound for a house of worship like a temple or a church, to arenas, to stadiums, to conference rooms, and various things like that. So wherever you want to design audio over there. And a pre-sales engineer job is basically understanding what the requirement is. So if somebody has to design a conference room, and also for the next project design an arena, so the design is definitely not the same. So they understand what are the requirements and what is the optimal thing. So it also goes through budgeting and various design aspects on what kind of materials to use, which is the right material to use, what works there. There's a lot of acoustical properties and challenges that you also consider. And pre-sale and design engineer, they work very close together. So they kind of pre-plan this and simulate this and create more more like I'm forgetting the term. More like yeah, they present it to the client in advance. So this is at the pre-production stage, you're idly, and once, so AV engineer, what he does is he basically commissions them at the phase, and also takes care of installing this. AV project engineer, of course, is also working along with it. So it can be also taken care of already installed setup. Like if you get a job in terms of where you're working for a hospitality industry or a cruise line. So so if you have to do sound for cruise lines where the sound has already been installed from a system integration company, so you take care of that. Then yes, the last that I would also like to talk about is gaming audio. Gaming audio, as you can imagine, is very big. A big fact that I would like to tell you is of all the industries in terms of audio that you've seen, we've went through pro audio, film sound, music production, and broadcast, live sound, and audio visual integration. In terms of revenue, one of the biggest industry within gaming, within pro audio, is game audio. So it's assumed and said that gaming audio industry is about 2 or 3 times bigger than Hollywood productions. Of course, as you can imagine, because gaming audio is extremely accessible to everybody. There might be people who watch certain kind of movies that also is dependent on demographics and age. But when it comes to gaming audio, you almost have a vast majority of people who are actually using. So it's not really games for kids or maybe young adults or teenagers, but everybody is doing that. So gaming audio, so you have companies like EA Sports and Electronic Media, to NCSoft, to Kings, and all of these companies. So it's also very booming at this time. You have different companies making products exclusively for gaming audio, and you have roles as sound composer and sound designer. So basically the sound composer and sound designer work accordingly. They work together, and the audio engine engineer basically works on designing and embedding this composition and design and sound design into the game engine itself. Another interesting thing is that most of the gaming audio industry is also knows a bit of programming, so you need some kind of knowledge with Java or C++ to design a few things. It's very interesting field, especially if you want to get into gaming audio. It's really great because games is an industry which will keep growing, and with the likes that you have currently, like VR and augmented reality, so you have games going into a whole different expanse because the gaming companies want to introduce a whole different experience. Yes, I would like to take this time and basically shift to another video, and this is basically about Keith Alexander, who is a Hollywood artist, and I think it's essential for all of you guys to understand, because he covers most of the things that we spoke about within different industries like gaming audio, music production. And it would be interesting to know from his point of view on what he thinks and likes, especially more insight into the industry itself. So I hope you enjoyed that.
I've worked in all sorts of applications in audio, from film to TV to game. I'm a designer, a mixer, and more recently I'm a writer and presenter. I'm Keith Alexander, and I've been an audio pro for about 25 years. I started in this industry with managing bands. So I got into managing bands, and then I thought I should move into studios. I wanted to get into recording bands, and I ended up in recording studios with the bands. I just loved the vibe. And it was only a few years later that I realized that my dominant sense is my ears. And when I got into studios, I started working with music, and then we developed into post-production, and then I moved into video and recording on location. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I kind of missed the studio, so I wanted to get back into the studio, so I went into post-production studio. And we did everything from, dubbing to feature films to TV. And it just gathered momentum over the years. And then 25 years later, I'm kind of still in the industry. I'm kind of wondering, should I actually go out and get a real job? But it's just been, it's been a roller coaster of pure joy, and it's everything that is me, essentially. And it was the day that I was recording with Seamus Heaney, the Nobel poet, and Billy Connolly. They were working on an animation series together. And you have these two absolute giants, one of the literary world and one of the comedy world, stroke acting world. And there we're just sitting around and we're having cups of tea and we're, chatting and whatever else, and we're doing the work, and Billy goes in and he was so professional. He was amazing. And then Seamus Heaney, the Seamus Heaney, is sitting beside me to my left, and we're just chatting. What do you think of that, Seamus? Yeah, it was grand. Maybe he could do this. Billy, would you mind? And I'm sitting between these two gods, and they're just gone. And days like that, they will always remain with me. So working on the big stuff is nice. You get to meet so-and-so, and you get to meet Brad Pitt, you get to meet other Kate Blanchett, always very nice. But it's the big memories for me are the ones that stick with me. The Seamus Heaney gig, editing on the natural history films by Ken O'Sullivan. The man turns around to me, and he says, "There's my movie." He's been working on this to the bone for 2 years. He is risking life and limb, and he's putting this film together, jumping in a boat, going 3 miles out into the Atlantic, diving off a boat off the continental shelf with all sorts of creatures and animals, and he's free diving, no tanks, no nothing. Goes and he shoots the whole lot. But he shoots the whole lot with no hydrophones. So he brings me 56 minutes of absolute clarity, nothing there. So he gets onto research vessels and goes 3K down under the water, the creatures down there and what they do. We have no idea what they sound like, no idea how they move, no idea. These have never been seen, a lot of these creatures before. And when I'm given a palette like that, I can turn around and I can do anything. I discovered Nuendo for the first time when I saw version 4. At the time, I was in Pro Tools, and you have no other choice when you're in Pro Tools because of their business model. You are invested so heavily with cost and experience. I had to look for something else. For me to develop any further on Pro Tools costs you a fortune. So I started looking at Nuendo version 4, and I thought, oh, that's beautiful. It's an alternative. But I had my Avid desk, so I couldn't integrate it at that stage. Then Nuendo version 5.5 came out, and I said, that's it, full stop. The ADR section, because we were doing tons of dubbing at the time. So the ADR section, it was a no-brainer. We had an ADR package that had to hook up to Pro Tools, and I think the package just for one seat was coming in at €1,800, and it did one very small job for me, and it was proprietary, so everything that went into it had to be in that format. Everything that came out of it had to be in that format. It didn't work for me. So when Nuendo 5.5 came along with the ADR section, I said, now, this is a real alternative. And that's when I started using it. And I've been using the ADR package with Nuendo since, seamlessly, thankfully. I developed with Nuendo and using Nuendo initially from my initial interest with the ADR section, and then discovering the other aspects of Nuendo as a package. I mean, you got your EDL conform, you got your media bay, you've got all these different aspects of the one package that sit in the one package. So whatever your workflow is, it's quite amazing that you can cover whatever workflow it is, be it game, film, TV, design, all in the one package. There is no added hardware that you need to do such and such a function, or you need software to actually import an MP3 or something like that. Just craziness. So the fact that you have a package that delivers on the professional levels, absolutely, in so many different aspects, and you have it all to hand. You have your ADR section, you have your, media bay. Media bay I love Media Bay because you know what? I have it there. I have all my sound effects, whether I'm recording them or it's some library stuff. Your preview pane is massive. It's great in comparison to any others I've seen. So I can actually get in and see what I'm hearing. And the one thing I love about Media Bay is if I'm editing a movie in Pro Tools, I have to bring in the whole audio file. I have to trim to wherever I find my audio and then place that at where I want it. It's hugely time consuming and the amount of data you're dealing with is massive. So you have a bulbous session at the end of your edit. Media Bay comes along, you got this beautiful big pane, you can find your bit, you select the bit you want and you drag it into your timeline. Simple. You save so much time, you save so much data. Media Bay for me as an editor is a winner every time. Yeah, when I look at the industry, I see huge changes. I see the film industry with all its sequels and things like that narrowing itself into a very small area of audio post-production. The very few will deal with the very big gigs. On the other hand, with streaming media and Netflix and stuff like this, there is just such expansion and development and scope for work, creativity, and the stuff that won't make the big screen can happen on the small screen, but the stories will still continue. The creativity will still continue. And there will always be a voice for that. Broadcast, I don't see a huge future for it. I suppose they all have to change their business models. But it's the streaming services that I see now hold all the balls in the industry. With these streaming services investing so much in production, it can only be good for the audio post industry. We could really do with a good injection of cash and interest and keep things floating, keep people positive and happy, because that develops good storytelling, creativity, and just a family of interesting projects that everyone from Europe to America to China are all coming up together. And when you have tools like Nuendo and working with Nuage to help tell those stories in an efficient manner. So you don't have massive budgets, but you can still come up with amazing productions and storytelling with the tools that we have. And Nuendo's part of that story.
Hey, welcome back. Well, I hope that was informative for you guys. And I've been seeing some questions. You'll have to bear with me because I'll have to roll up on the chat again to check the previous messages because I didn't really pay attention while I was doing the presentation. I will try to answer most of your questions. I did see some of the questions, but just to finish up, I think just the first half of the presentation is that you have to know that this is a technical creative arts, so it's considered as one of the highest skilled role. And it is quite important to also understand that this is deemed as just as any other engineering job. So but at the same time it is creative, so you have a great combination of creative aspect and technical aspect as well. We'll take time now to basically shift to question and answers, because I think we might be running out of time now. So the first question that I received is from Mr. Jai Prakash, and it's just, can you suggest basic equipments? Well, I hope you don't mind, because I'm looking at another screen and answering. Needed for individual, can you suggest basic equipments needed for individual departments in college, since webinars are going to become the order of the day? That is true. Very good question, Mr. Jai Prakash. I think you have various resources in terms of, I think Zoom or Microsoft Teams are doing presently really good job, and even team viewers, for instance. So you have these 3 applications that you can actually use to screen share, and at the same time also do presentations. Another effective way to do it is my presentations. As you can see that this part of the screen, which is basically my face, is cropped down, and right behind me is presentation. It would be a good insight for you guys. I'm using a software called OBS to basically present this on YouTube. It's easy to use, and it's open source, and you can actually have multiple sources from camera to basically just selecting a file to an image, and have different scenes. So you can actually do presentations, have another, if you have a Zoom call or Skype call, have those 2 join together and do a presentation together. OBS software, I think you can actually Google them. It's or maybe at the end I will try to leave that on the chat, so you guys know. I hope that answers your question. So just bear with me as I'm moving and checking the questions. Okay, suggest some basic online courses for beginners in audio production. The best one I would say is YouTube, because there's so much of resources, but again you have to be careful on what kind of content that you are following, because again the best is, since it's creative arts, you have everybody trying to teach you a certain way, and some are self-learned. Most of them are self-learned, so you have to understand that for somebody's type of workflow is not the same as yours. So the best way to learn audio courses is basically reading user manuals, number 1. Second thing is actually signing up for Udemy courses, because I think if you go online on Udemy, you will find various courses, and there are quite a few good YouTube channels. Another YouTube channel that I could suggest is by UK producer, I forgot, Warren Stewart. I think, yeah, you can check out his channels. Maybe he would be essential. He talks about a lot of basics and about mixing methods and different ways. So I guess that would be really helpful for you guys. Okay. Well, it's nice to see so many people have come. Right. Okay, I think we already covered difference between Foley and live sound. Oh, okay. So brief DAWs, compare rate Cubase, Nuendo on par with Pro Tools and Logic Pro. That is actually a good question. As far as comparison goes, well, of course, it would be essential, because you have to know that I work for Steinberg, so I would obviously vote for Cubase and Steinberg. products, Nuendo. But again, from the user point of view of actually using the product, we definitely have edge in terms of certain areas. Pro Tools is of course known as the industry standard and is definitely doing very well in terms of the reach out and the expanse that they have. Steinberg also has really good features when it comes to Cubase and Nuendo itself. So the difference between mostly Cubase and Nuendo is that Cubase is mostly designed towards mostly post-production areas, and Nuendo is mostly designed for more pro audio specific industries. So if you think about film sound or film sound compositions as mixing, where basically you're dealing with thousands of tracks and or maybe ADR dubbing or sound designs of 1,000 samples, you can of course do that in Cubase itself, but you have certain automated features that makes it more useful and faster in Nuendo as opposed to Cubase. Another interesting aspect would, we can take an example of game audio itself. We are currently at Nuendo the only product in the market where apart from Reaper of course, is that you can actually integrate game audio sounds into game audio engine more feasible and easily than Pro Tools for that matter. Of course you have different strengths. And I guess it eventually boils down to users' preference and how they like the workflow approaches, because most of the DAWs is designed and have been developed over the years, understanding users workflow. So understanding how a certain segment of industry within live sound, music productions and film sound, and how they use a certain DAW, and that's how they use it. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Or is it any expansion of RF engineer? I'm not really sure I get that. Are you saying that is that another role? Yes, RF engineer is basically another dedicated role where he basically deals with wireless racks in a live sound setup. So his job is basically to make sure that there are no interference during concerts, because if you have the male lead or female or vocalist or speaker who has the mic, and if their mic basically has some interference during the concert, and of course you can have a backup mic, but of course it's a lot easier to actually scan the frequencies and make sure that they are allotted in their available bands. So basically you can have interference from different things. Maybe there's you're doing a concert where there are obviously too many people with mobile phones, so you can have various interferences. So basically designing and allotting your bands into specific segments, so it's easier and you have less of interference during the shows. It can not just be shows, but wherever you're using wireless microphones or receivers and antennas for that matter. Yes, I had another questions from VK Productions. Is sound engineering related to live sound? Yes, absolutely. Live sound is of course related to sound engineering, because it deals with sound that you need to amplify on a large scale to medium scale, for audience, on festival sounds or house of worship, temples and different areas. I had another question, which is like, know about any music instruments for this work process. Oh, okay. So I think it is essential to know music because it helps you become a better audio engineer. Because if you have good understanding of at least listening, even if you do not have good understanding of playing any instruments, but at least if you listen to good music, from time to time, and have not just listening to one type of music, but various type of music. It really helps you understand the dynamics of how a certain genre of music is produced, like electronic music or classic rock, to different areas, because they all are produced at a certain and different ways. So I think it is very essential to use them, and it is helpful if you are applying that, and say if you end up becoming a mixing engineer, a mastering engineer. It would really help you get your job a little more easier, to get the results better. Yeah. Okay. Well, we have a question about sample rates. Yes. So basically, sample rates, as you can imagine, the ideal audio manufacturer that we produce is any audio equipment that you have that has sampling capabilities. It's ideally done at 44 kilohertz, and there is a reason behind that. Not to really get too technical, but at least to just give an impression and differentiation. And the higher the sample rate that you have, it is known that you have better sound quality, and how that can reciprocate with how we perceive sound is that if human hearing is basically between 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, but actually we do not really hear 20 hertz, which is like the lowest frequency. We can't really hear the 20,000 hertz. The children's or babies hear most of these bands. They can hear as low as 30 hertz to as high as 18K or 19,000 hertz above. But as you keep growing older, and with age, your band kind of reduces, so it goes down a bit. So how that reciprocates to sample rate is, of course, when you want to record, you want to have better resolution. So 44. So it's based on Nyquist theorem or theory. If some of you guys have studied that in college already, it's basically sampling at a higher rate, so you get more information. So basically that's like the simplest information or understanding that you can have. Moving on to the next few questions. Okay. Any reliable open source software for beginners? Reaper. I would definitely recommend that. Please try Reaper out, because I think it lets you evaluate for a very long time, and although it's not free, but you can actually have full capability on importing, editing, mixing, and producing whatever you need, just like any other professional DAW. Okay. Okay, I have another question which says the audio visual integration stage is where I'm not sure if that's a question, but yes, it's for both concert hall and theater. It's designed, you do audio visual system integration anywhere, basically, wherever you need sound to be installed as a permanent installation. Which audio interface would you recommend? Well, anything that comes within your budget, I would say, is recommended. Well, of course, because I feel it's easier to start with more focusing towards the budget that you have, and because once you use it and the capabilities that it has and the functionalities that it lacks over the usage period, then you can make a better informed decision on what you really need for your purpose. Because you have audio interfaces range from as $100 to as much as 2,000 or 3,000 euros or dollars, for that matter. But I think basic Behringer or M audio interface should be pretty decent to start with. But in terms of mid-range products, if you really are looking into something that's more reliable, then I think I could recommend something like Focusrite or so. Okay. Okay, cool. Another good question, which is DIY acoustics for beginners who do podcasting. Best thing is to use blankets. So you have your wall hangers, or wherever you basically dry your clothes on. So you need to kind of tilt it vertically and then use use either blankets, a lot of them if possible, so that kind of gives you a little better, does not give you isolation, but at least a little more damp solution. Apart from blankets, then you can actually, anything that is thick and is able to use that. Or I would also say that use thick curtains around the house if you are not really at the moment want to invest in acoustic panels or so. Yeah. This is- I got a question from VK Production, which is, does this do anything with distribution of audio to new generation of sound VFX? I am not really sure I understand that. Do you mean to say sound VFX, sound effects? Well, VFX is basically, the video virtual effects itself. SFX is just sound itself. How does a record label sign an artist, and does a well-known label look for artists with a good fan base or the quality of music? So the reality, that's a very good question from Gaurav Karthik. Record label, yes, does sign in artists. I think it's mostly to do with the music itself, and of course the trend over the years has changed. In the past, about 10 years ago, before YouTube or any of these came in existence, it used to be more on, idly, what bands would do is record music and release an EP of 3 songs or 1 song, and try to play covers and their original music in live arenas, small arenas or so. And and of course, from there get some popularity and try to do shows over there. And from there they would bring out a portfolio and present it to record label also, and reach out to them with their EP and the song that they have recorded. Now it's more different. It's a lot easier, because you can actually put you have things like SoundCloud. You can actually publish your own sound through SoundDisk or Discogs, for instance, or through Spotify. So you have various multiple ways to do it. The trend over the years has become that there are more independent artists and musicians. So musicians are kind of in itself doing their own, becoming their own record label, at least in most cases, or that's the trend that people are following, because the ability to put out your own content through different online media platforms that are available. Okay. Yes, framing audio is a good topic. Do the quality of audio change from a movie to a game? I think not so, but I think what's the quality of audio does not change, but I would say the way it is consumed is definitely changed. So, for example, if you say music itself, like from a band that you like, is usually consumed over headphones or speakers or Bluetooth speakers, or so to say. But when it comes to film sound, it's of course has more expanse, because you have more details, like you have surround sounds. So there are at production stage, production stage, you have people actually sorry about that. Yeah, at production stage you have people actually designing this, and basically mixing for surround sound and ambisonics, of course. So it's really helpful that way, to and of course you have, with current trends of virtual reality and augmented reality, there's multiple ways of hearing it. So in terms of quality, I think I would like to say that the it wouldn't, I wouldn't say quality, but it's more of resolution. So I guess it's more like the better resolution we are in a current scenario or a trend where people are trying different ways to consume audio through virtual reality and having more dimensions. So right now you can actually Google things about ambisonics, read about MPEG Edge audio from Fraunhofer Institute. It's the same company that actually produced or rather created MP3 format. Okay, speak about types of microphones that we can use for vocal recordings. The most evident microphones that's universally used, I would recommend, is SM58 from Shure microphone. It's almost foolproof. It works as it should. A beautiful dynamic microphone. Depending on what kind of content you're recording, you might want to shift to a condenser microphone or a combination of condenser and a dynamic microphone. It also depends on the kind of and microphones are more like mobile phones, which is kind of personal use, so it goes well with an artist's choice, because and it relates to the way you sound. So that's why you have different artists and vocalists choosing a certain microphones, because they like that. So and of course that comes at a level where you are more professional and exploring more options to make your sound a little better. Yeah. So okay, cool. So I think that's pretty much it. We've tried to answer as much as we can. If there's certain things, please feel free to, I will leave out the email to Leo sir, and you can either mail us, and we will try to catch up with that. Thank you again for your time today. I hope it was helpful, and thank you from Hamburg. Stay safe and be at home, and I wish you all safe time with family and friends, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much.